some basic Unix commands. Again, Unix is an operating system, and we're going to go ahead and log in, and then we'll start playing with some of the simple basic commands that you're going to need to kind of manage your account and your web files during this web development course. So let's go ahead and log into the server. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type in SSH. I have to click on my screen, SSH, my username at ssh.cs.dixie.edu. It's going to go ahead and ask me for my password, and I'm in. Now, probably the first Unix command you want to know about is the ls command. If we type in ls and hit return, it gives us a list of files. So there are some other ways that we can list our files. We can do ls-l, and this is the long format of listing the files, and I often use this especially when I'm changing permissions or doing something like that. Navigating around in the file structure is fairly easy as well. To get into a different folder, for example, all of these are folders. If you look at the D in front of each of the directory of these listings, it lists this D. And the D means, okay, we got a directory. So if I wanted to go inside of a directory, I can go cd space the name of the directory. So if I wanted to do public underscore HTML, I'm now inside of public underscore HTML, and you can kind of see that the prompt changed as well as we got inside of that. So if I want to list files that are inside of that, again, I would do an ls-l, and I can list a whole bunch of files and things that are inside that. Anyway, there's quite a few little files inside there. If I wanted to go inside another one, I could go cd space. Looks like I've got a file right here called Zion. I can hit enter, and if I wanted to see what the listings of those are, I can do ls-l. Looks like there's a bunch of neat panos inside of there, panoramic images that I could access. Well, what if I wanted to go back to my root directory where I was before I started, because I'm inside the Zion folder and inside public underscore HTML? Well, I can go cd space ... and it'll take me back a level. Now if I do a directory listing there, it gives me everything that's in that public underscore HTML directory. And if I go cd space ... again, it takes me back to the main listings. And if I do ls space -l, then I can see a directory listing like that. And that's basically how you navigate around. If you want to create a new folder, you can go mkdir space or make directory and the name of the folder. So I'll just call it new. And if I now list out my directory listing, you'll see that there's a new directory with these permissions that's just been created. If I wanted to delete that folder, because I don't have any really use for that, remove directory, new, ls space -l, and it's gone. It's no longer there in the listing. Alright, those are some basic commands, and I think that'll give you an ability to at least navigate up and down in the directory, see what kind of files there are, and see where you are. That gives you some basic skills. There's a lot more to learn about Unix, obviously, but that's probably enough for just an introduction. Next thing we want to look at is file permissions in Unix. File permissions basically answer the question, who can have permissions and what permissions can be set. So if we look at these folders and things, I'm going to focus on this public underscore HTML folder just for a minute, because that's the one we're going to be spending the most time on in this web class. If you look, let's review what the permissions are and what they mean. First of all, we know that that's a folder because there's a D in front of it. How do we check to see if it's a file? Well, if I went inside the public underscore HTML directory and found a file, I'm sure there are some files. See right here, it doesn't have the D in front of it. It looks like there's a file on there called that. Looks like there's some other files. We got a file here, but mostly in that main level you've got a whole bunch of directories. You've got some grids, and here's another file, index.html, iphone.jpg, IT3500. So those are all files, and these are folders. As we look through that listing, cd space dot dot space dash L. So we're looking at a folder and its permissions. Files have their same permissions as well. The first three permissions are set for the user. And what you have is read is the R, W for write, and X for execute. And so when you're setting permissions, you're either allowing or denying a certain user, which this would be the user. These three permissions would be the group, and these three would be other or public permissions. And so as you look at that, you've got the owner, the group, and world or anyone. So the owner's permissions, the group's permissions, and everyone's permissions. And certain permissions you may not want to give, like you may not want to give write permissions to just everyone on your folder, because then they can go in and change things. So that's why you want to allow and deny certain kinds of permissions. Let's go ahead and change some of the permissions on this. Right now, the permissions are set for the owner to be able to read, write, and execute, the group to read and execute, and everyone to read and execute. Well, what if I wanted to limit those permissions some? The command to do that is chmod, C-H-M-O-D, space, and we can use an octal method for setting permission. The best way to describe that is using octal digits. You get basically a text equivalent. So if you say 7, so chmod 7 for the owner. If you said 7 for the group and 7 for everyone, and then the name of the public underscore HTML, the name of the directory, and then hit return, what I've just done in that, let's go look at the listing now. What I've just done is I've created a problem, really. And that's why it turned green. It's like, you probably don't want to give everyone permissions to do everything, because now anyone who wants to can come in and write over in my web directory. But you notice that it changed all access to every one of those. So 7 means read, write, and execute. If you use the octal digit 6, what is it going to do? What if I did chmod 7, because I want the owner to always have read, write, and execute. I'm not going to turn that off. And then 6.6, and then public underscore HTML. And let's look at what that just did. Well, read, write, and execute for the owner. Read, write, no execute. Read, write, no execute for the other two. Let's keep going. So if I go chmod 755, what do you think is going to happen now? Well, that's going to change what's limited. A 5 allows for write and execute. A read and an execute. A 4 is just a read. A 3 is write and execute. A 2 is write. A 1 is execute. And a 0 is no permissions. So again, let's review through these permissions. A 7 is read, write, and execute. So everything is allowed. A 6 is read and write access are allowed. A 5 is read and execute access are allowed. A 4 is read access is only allowed. A 3, a write and execute access are allowed. A 2 is a write only access. A 1 is an execute only access. And a 0 is all types of access are denied. So if I go to 755, we can go ahead and look at this. ls space dash L. We hit enter, and it looks like we got read and execute for those two 5s. What if I go chmod chmod 744 public underscore HTML, list out what that does, and now we have read, write, execute, and only read, execute for the group and for the public. I'll keep going. chmod space 733 public underscore HTML ls space dash L, And it looks like you've got write execute for these two. Write and execute, write and execute. And anytime you do write execute for anyone, it kind of notifies you over here. You have an issue. Chmod 722. And you have write execute only. Let's go 711. You have execute only, so read, execute, execute, so 711. And you can do other combinations. Or what if I want to do chmod space 701 public underscore HTML? What do you think that's going to do? Well, what that should do is give 0 access for the group, so the 3 group accesses will go to no, it's not going to allow anything for the group, and you should have 1 for execute there. Let's go ahead and see if that works. And that's about what worked. So on my public underscore HTML, I'm going to go chmod 755. And that's about the level I want it to be at for this. Now there's 2 sets of permissions that we have to set up for our accounts to work for new CIT students. There's 2 places we need to change things. One is the public underscore HTML. Let's go ahead and set it to 755, and I just did that. The other thing is I need to change my home directory. So I'm going to go cd space ... And if I'm at my main level, it's going to take me to all the Ds. I'm going to list all the user accounts that are D, and if I scroll up here, I can find dped right here. And what permissions need to be set there? So I need to have read, write, execute, and then execute for everyone. That's what will make our web servers work based on the configuration that we have. So you need to go to your own home account, because you can only run this on your own home account, and go chmod space. That permission is 701, and then the name of your user account. And once you do those 2 things, your account is set up and ready to go on the web.